All right, let's go. All right. Here, let's go. I love that opening. I really do. Who had...
Gentleman that we work with on the Rock'em Sock'ems named Peter Ross wrote that.
What was his last name?
Ross, R-O-S-S, Peter Ross. Okay. And he was just a genius with music. And you look at so many talented people that,
Yeah, you look at them.
And he put that's my voice in there.
That's your voice, yeah.
He picked it up, hey? Boy, the guy. Anyhow, let's talk about Columbus last night. I watched that game last night. Now, they get outshot 18-4 in the first period. And I can hear Brad Larson, from BC.
Yep, he's the coach. This is Sunday morning. So
I can hear him going and saying, you guys, this is hockey night in Canada. This goes across Canada. This is how you'll be remembered for your mom and dad at home watching and all your friends watching. Holy Dinah, did they come out? And they outshot Toronto 36-18 in the last two periods. That's hard to believe, I know.
But you have to admit, Dad, last night was Saturday night, but the Friday game in Columbus.
Don't even talk about that.
Well, it reminded me of a story that was funny that I think we've told once before, but you and Danny Gallivan were doing a game.
Oh,
it was one of your first, you were doing color.
I was doing color. Imagine me doing color.
Couldn't imagine it.
With Danny Gallivan, and people don't know Danny Gallivan, he was maybe the greatest
of all time. He used to come in before the game, 20 minutes before the game. He'd stand by himself. He used to have a lighter, and he'd smoke, and he'd look at the games and see the players and all that. And anyhow,
so it was a particularly bad game. And what did he say to you?
He said, well, Mr. Cherry, what did you think of that period? And I said, Danny, the only star in that game is going to be the Zamboni driver. Yes, he said, I'd have to say that period wasn't very good. He says, it's like a hobo's coat. Shabby. And we both got letters.
Right.
The only time you got a letter was with me. Imagine me saying, imagine now.
Only you could get Danny
Gallivan
in trouble.
In trouble.
But you're telling the truth. I mean, anybody trying to sell that game Friday night between Columbus and Toronto, I mean, it was just awful. And I remember you said, it's hard to believe that 10 guys can roar around the ice and not run into each other once in a while.
It is really amazing how 10 guys, well, I guess.
I mean, that's really scary for you to think that you could, that they let you have with a live mic.
With Ralph Milbury,
Yeah.
Doing color. And you could say anything that popped into your head.
Yeah, and that's, I don't know. Anyhow, it was, and they ended up losing anyhow. I bet you Leafs, what the heck's going on here?
Yeah, especially Columbus, because they're in the Connor Bedard race. They're in the lead. They're saying, whoa, okay, once in a while win a game, but...
Boy, I imagine they don't get it after playing all those years. Well, let's go. Let's jump into Edmonton. Jack Campbell is 8-0 in his last 8, and it took a while. A goaltender takes a while to get warmed up, and he's warmed up. He's 8-0. I just thought I'd throw that in. And I like Owen Powers for Rookie of the Year. He won't get Rookie of the Year because they go by points now. When I read that, or when I think that, I think of Bobby Orr winning the scoring championship 2 years. He won the scoring champion.
No defenseman will ever win the scoring championship again.
Never again. And he won it 2 years. I know he didn't win it in a row. No, scoring champion. Imagine how much he'd get.
Would that have gotten Phil upset, like the forwards upset?
It's funny you say that.
It's my job to score the goals.
On that team was Carol Vanier. He'd be the last guy to get on the plane, and I'd be standing there, and I'd be the last guy to get on the plane. And I asked him, I said, why does Phil... Why does Bobby give so many points away? Bobby Orr won the scoring championship over him.
You could see that a forward like Phil would be sort of perturbed. That's sort of his job.
What do they have? The Lord saves or something?
The bumper sticker.
Yeah, and they had the big sign, Jesus saves, but Espo gets the rebound.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was the bumper sticker.
Yeah, it was a bumper
They don't
sticker.
have signs anymore, in hockey. Remember all the good signs of Buffalo and
Remember the guy in Philadelphia?
yeah, the sign.
Oh, that
in
guy was
Philly.
good.
Oh,
With the
he used
hair.
to-
He had the
He used to
afro.
bug me. He never bugged you.
You were always looking at him.
I was always looking at him after he'd score. I'd look at him and see if he'd score. Cheevers used to like him.
Yeah.
Anyhow, Cheevers never not to upset Cheevers. Every time we go in and we get 51 shots, and he played dynamite. The only place he didn't play good was Montreal.
Talk about signs. I remember there was always a lot of good signs about you, though, on the opposing team. Remember the one it had about John and you, goon with the win?
yeah.
I always remember that sign.
I think in Buffalo at one time they had Don Cherry and Winsink, goon with the wind. I thought that was pretty good.
Yep.
So, Dad, talking about Owen Powers and Buffalo, I mean, they're knocking around the playoffs.
It's funny how everybody was talking about Kevin Adams being a dumb general manager. Nobody's saying a word about him now.
It was headlines. Does he know what he's doing? Inexperience, getting ripped off. And then all of a sudden they're doing well. You don't even, not a word about him.
Nothing but him at all. And it's funny. It really is funny that they don't even mention Kevin Adams.
You know, Dad, I was really happy with two top guys that know hockey pretty good. McDavid and Sidney Crosby were saying about they like to get rid of the shootout to get rid of the ties. I mean, and they all love 3-on-3. It's fun to watch. They obviously like to play it. Why don't they change?
They'll listen to those guys. 3-on-3. I look forward to the tie. If the game is tied, I stay with the game. On television and everything because I want to see the 3-on-3. And
yeah, it's almost disappointing when there's a penalty on 3-on-3.
Yeah.
There's a 4. It's 4-on-3.
So what? I'm sorry. What do they do for a penalty on 3-on-3?
Then they go 4-on-3.
Oh, 4-on-3.
So it's not the same though, right?
no, it's not the same.
It's not
thing.
even like 4-on-4 is any good either. It's 3-on-3 is the fun thing.
Yeah, you have a lot of fun, and I think they will eventually do away with it, and they'll play because they're usually scored in the first 5 minutes or so.
Right. So they were saying if you extend it to 10 minutes and then do a shootout, they said somebody will score within the 10 minutes.
Yeah, they better score. Boy, I tell you, when they have those 3-on-3, nobody turns the TV off when it's 3-on-3.
So, Cindy, Dad, we'd like to thank our sponsor, Spreads.ca. They're a Canadian-owned online casino and sportsbook. And if you sign up now and use the promo GRAPES, they'll match your deposit up to $500. They'll give you 10 spins on the big wheel for some big dough. On your first bet, they'll spot you $25. So
Why would you want to go with somebody else?
Dad, I was talking to a friend, and he was listening to Chris Nyland's podcast, and he had Mike Milbury on with him. And I guess they were talking about the story about you and Mike driving on Route 1 and saving the infamous weed.
I'll tell you the whole story. Mike and I used to pick up Mike. I picked him up for the practices all the time. I don't know why I did. Anyhow, not all the time, but most of the time.
He just lived about 4 doors down from us.
Yeah. And what was it? Salem Road, eh?
Salem, was it Salem Road or Salem Drive?
And it wasn't drive. I think it was
Salem
road.
Road, yeah, in North Andover.
Yeah, we could go into that. Remember the horse got hit by the car?
We actually was so rural, is that the word, that the people up the street, the horses always got out.
Yeah.
And we'd have pictures of them grazing on our front lawn.
Yeah.
And you kept yelling at the girl. And I think the girl actually thought you were yelling at the girl because you didn't want the horses on the ground.
Wasn't that?
But it wasn't. You said they're going to get hit by a car. And guess what? The horse did get hit by a car.
The guy was crying.
And you gave him no sympathy whatsoever and said, well, what did you think was going to happen?
I went over to the guy and I said, don't you feel bad at all? I said, these jerks. And the lady.
You know what happened, Dad? My wife and I, we went to Boston about 4 years ago, and I went to see the house.
Yeah.
And I wish I didn't.
Why?
It's all changed. And I said, I had this thing in this memory of what the house was like. And like all the woods are all cut down. The one pond that I used to go fishing every day is gone. It's just like you look and you go.
The old story. Anyhow, you can't go home.
Can't go home. Yeah, Mike. You know who said that too? That we were talking to was Ralph Mellenby. Ralph Mellenby was executive producer of Hockey Night in Canada and Olympics, and I was in Lillehammer for the Olympics.
Oh yeah.
And it was just a beautiful it was just like right out of a fairy book. And I said, I'm going to come back. And Ralph said, no, don't. He says, it'll never be the same. He says, just remember it the way it is, and there's other places to go see.
Yeah, it's happened to me a few times.
Yeah, but we looked at that house on Elm Drive. It hasn't changed much.
Oh, they got a brand new roof on it.
Well, yeah, but it's still red.
And then and they only left one little thing about the Bruins on. They didn't even. I think they missed it. It was in the corner of the garage. They had a little Bruin sticker I put on, and they left that on there. Anyhow, how was it? Oh yeah. Anyhow, I picked up Mike, and we used to drive into practice, and we used to have some great. He didn't like John Wayne. John Wayne he did not like. John Wayne. And I said, who do you like? He said, Woody Allen. Woody Allen? You don't like John Wayne, you like Woody Allen. So you know what kind of guy he was.
Yeah, Mike was a little bit left-leaning back then.
He was left-wing.
Yeah, believe it or not, now. Woo.
he fit right in.
Yeah.
Anyhow, as we're driving in on Route 1, just before we come to the bridge, there was this weed. And I said, that's the way we are. We're tough and,
Because it was a weed growing on like the divide between the two
Yeah, to the left.
The north and southbound lanes.
And it was really busy all the time. I think it was Mystic River Bridge. Anyhow, and I see in the distance, I see this machine that's going to clean up everything, and he's going to take our weed with it. And he said, pull over. So I pull over. I said, what's the matter with this guy? So I pull over. He dances in between cars and gets the weed. Believe it or not. And he danced over. I don't know how he got the weed, but he got the weed. And he said, nobody's going to get our weed. And I never forgot that. Imagine he had to get hit by a car.
Yeah, well, Route 1, that's like, for Canadians, that's like the 401 or Trans.
Yeah.
It's pretty bad.
Yeah, well, that's the thing about Route 1. It has, like, it's like the 401, but with driveways leading into the stores. So you had to go 0 to 60 in about, 50 feet,
Well,
if that.
when you got on there, you had to drive.
No hesitation.
That's where you learned to drive.
Oh, you know it. I learned. I'm an aggressive driver.
Yeah.
I survived Boston and
I'm not.
Route 1.
So speaking about Kowloons, there's one more story about Mike Milbury that after a game, on a road trip, you guys had won and were feeling good and came back and stopped off at Kowloons and got some spare ribs.
And we all went to the house and we ate spare ribs, and I just kept putting them in the canary. And the canary,
that was unbelievable.
Big John, I call him John. And
but weren't you guys looking at it and you said, I wonder if that canary will eat this meat off the spare ribs?
And he picked it clean.
Because remember, I'm looking, completely clean, and you turned the rib around to get the other end, and he ate it all.
I don't know.
That's
what I do?
weird.
I'm going to tell you a story about that canary. We were coming back to Canada, and you can't get birds across the border. You can get dogs, but you can't get birds.
Well, you can even tell how the bird got to Denver was even good on the plane.
Oh, you tell that story, Cindy.
Well, I remember because it was our favorite canary. His name was John, after John Wensink, big tough canary, if you can believe it. Only you would have a big tough canary. And how were we going to get it to Colorado? And I remember you built a little cage of popsicle sticks. And you brought it, and Mom and Tim brought the bird into the cabin, right?
Right.
And you put it underneath the...
No, I held it.
You held it.
Yeah.
And didn't it start to sing on the plane?
It did. And I remember you went and talked to a canary expert, and he said the big fear was it wasn't going to get any water, because it's a long trip. So he said, make sure you feed it lettuce, because the lettuce has water in it. Water. So I had a big thing of lettuce in my pocket, and I would in the plane, I was feeding him, and he was eating it, and he started to sing.
That's unbelievable.
I imagine Stuart is coming back and hearing a canary sing.
Yeah. So now you're coming back.
I don't remember
east.
that. I drove out that with Blue.
Yeah, you drove out.
Oh,
with Blue.
You and I drove out with Blue in the car. Remember the car? The governor. The only part I know in a car is the governor went in that Cadillac. Anyway, that's another story.
What was I talking about? Mike Milbury
coming back. So coming back.
And the players call him Muldoon.
Yeah.
No, you were going to tell the story about because you knew the bird wasn't going to make it back.
Oh, I know. when I was in Colorado, I was coming back to Canada, and you cannot have birds. You can take dogs, but you can't bring birds. You know, so many diseases and everything. Anyhow, I drove around. I remember me driving around, and I found this guy that had this great big cage inside, and he had birds singing inside and tweeting away and everything. And I said, "Now here's $50. This is to feed this bird." I said, "I hope you let him the rest of his life in this flying with all these birds and everything." And he says, "I give you my word, I will." And I give him $50. And I said, that's to pay for his food. And that would pay for everything. But I remember, but that bird was Big John, and it was kind of green. Yeah. I remember.
So, I got to tell I'll tell the quick story of the next canary. So you got another canary.
So he had big shoes to fill.
Right. So we were moved back to, we're in Mississauga, and you called them Mats. So I remember one day you said something to Mom, like Ron was in the house or something like that, and you said to Mom, "Yeah, I think Mats need some water." And you said, Ron says, "Why do you call Mats?" And you said, "Well, I call him for Matt Sundin." And Ron thought, "Well, isn't that nice? You call him Matt Sundin." And you said, "Yes, he's like Matt Sundin. You know, Matt Sundin plays when he wants to play, and this bird kind of sings when he wants to sing."
That's the end of that bird.
Yeah.
Tim, you were saying there's a theory going around about Hamilton, Quebec, and Houston, Texas.
Right. So
you want to explain that?
So here's the theory, that the NHL said that they want to expand. And so they were talking about 2, maybe 3 teams. But the problem a lot of people are saying that the NHL is going to have in 2 years or 3 years, the Canadian rights for the television runs out. Yeah. It was $5 billion. Now, nobody's going to give them $5 billion, they think. So the cap will go down significantly because
I get so.
You know, they're not going to have that deal. So the rumor going around is that Quebec's going to get a franchise.
And a beautiful arena.
So they got a beautiful arena.
They're all set to go.
And Houston will get a franchise because it's one of the larger markets, and they want to have a rivalry with Dallas.
And they've always had hockey there.
Yeah. But the other one was they were saying that Hamilton might get a franchise. And the reason being is that if you get Hamilton and Quebec in the league, now the Canadian television rights are worth a lot more.
Well, I guess so. You'll have the 2 of the greatest rivalries of all time. Montreal and Quebec, there's no rivalry. Remember the last time? Remember the big brawl they had?
Yeah, it was a Good Friday Massacre, and
that
was the Hunter brothers started that. Dale started the first one, and Mark started the second brawl in the game.
Boy, were they good game. They were a good game. Anyhow,
and then you look and you go, Toronto-Hamilton would be a big rivalry, and to kind of fuel that fire, the arena in Hamilton where the Junior A Bulldogs play kicked them out.
And
they moved to Brampton, or Wayne Gretzky's home, or Brantford, I should say, not Brampton. And they're spending over $200 million in renovations for that arena.
And they're making nice boxes and stuff like that in Hamilton, and. So it sounds reasonable.
Yeah, because you say, why in Hamilton would they be spending that much money, $200 million on an arena? And the official word is that, well, they want to get acts in that can't get into Toronto. Well, that doesn't make any sense. Any big act wants to get in Toronto. There's plenty of places to play. So, and if you look, the Bulldogs owner, he owns 13% of Montreal, so he's got an in with the NHL.
Well, yeah, but he says no. You're not going to influence him in any way. Tim, I hope it happens. I know most people will be cheering for Hamilton, and because to be able to get tickets, and Quebec and Montreal, boy,
you won't be able to get tickets.
You won't be able to get tickets.
So speaking of the Leafs, Dad, I just want to ask you, and then Cindy, I'll get your opinion, because I heard some people talking on the radio and stuff of the Leafs have to get by the first round of the playoffs. So my question to you is, at the end of the day, at the end of the playoffs, what is a successful season for the Leafs? When you look back and said, okay, it was a pretty successful season.
Well, I think getting by the first round.
You're saying that the bar is set so low.
No, it's not quite that. It's not quite the same. I think getting by the first round and then they get ready for the second round. Just get by the first round. And who are they going to play, Tim?
Well, they're going to play Tampa. I mean, that's
Pretty tough to Tampa.
Yeah, and then they're going to get through. Then if they play Tampa, if everything goes according to Hoyle, then they're going to get by Boston.
Well, I think it'll be tougher getting by Tampa.
But you and I were talking, Dad, the one team that everybody better look out for are the Rangers.
Yeah,
Especially they got that Tarasenko now.
Yeah, they're a pretty good club. They can play it any way they want. They can play it tough. They can play it easy. They can play it any way they want.
You saw that Kadri hit, right? That Trouba hit.
Yeah, it was beauty.
Was that clean hit or was that a dirty hit?
No, that was a clean hit. Mm-hmm. Well, use his shoulder and hit him in the chest. What do you want?
Oh, everybody was saying, "Oh, it's a clean hit." There was fights and how terrible that was.
No, I've gone over this so many times. There's a hit and there's not a hit. Just as if you're mean. If you're mean after or something, I don't know what it is, but there's a hit and there's not a hit. I know that's hard to believe, but
Trouba showed no mercy.
No, if you don't show any mercy at all, you know somebody's coming. And he was all set. You know, he thought he was going to get up and go after him. Anyhow, there's a hit and then there's not a hit. And I know people don't understand that, but that's the way it goes, and that's the way it's always been, and it's still there.